Now, Aditi Tandon, who's the associate editor of the Tribune, is joining us to throw light on Dr. Manmohan Singh's contribution. First, let's try and put into context, Ms. Tandon, the contribution as a man, as an individual coming from a humble background, and then, reaching the height of his education in Oxford. That also takes a certain kind of willpower, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Not just Oxford, in fact, he was a rare academician, politician who earned degrees from two very important universities, global universities, the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge. And, when you look at his life journey and you look at the adversities that his family had to endure following the partition years, and, the way he faced the struggles in his life to keep his patience and to continue along the path of academic excellence through extreme focus, you realize that nothing is impossible in life.
Right.
So as a man, Dr. Manmohan Singh's life stands out as a clear example of, vanquishing all adversity to reach really the pinnacle of your career.
And then we'll look at his contributions, as a technocrat. Then coming in with all this knowledge, he gets into the government as an advisor in various economic ministries, and then, RBI governor, deputy chairman of the planning commission, all this before, he becomes the finance minister of India when he brings about those economic reforms. But let's talk about, how he slowly probably influenced policy as an advisor at that time, and then later on, when he was at the helm of affairs, managed to initiate it.
Right, when he joined the government for the first time in 1971, records point to a very important paper that he wrote for the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi-led government, in which he actually argued and told the policy makers that India should stop looking inwards when it comes to economic policy. So, Dr. Manmohan Singh clearly was much ahead of his times. Of course, those were the times when nationalization, socialism were at their peak. And, banks were being nationalized. The Indira Gandhi government was known for a certain set of policies. So for Dr. Singh to actually argue for an outward-looking economic policy at that time, I think was a very bold statement to have been made by a technocrat. But it also reflects that he was an intellectually very honest public servant, because he spoke truth to power and he warned India and the policymakers and the government much ahead of the time that you actually need to start the groundwork for that. And it was much later, as we all know, that Dr. Manmohan Singh was actually able to, open the economy of the country.
Sure, but let's look at the circumstances that led to that. There was the breakdown of the Soviet Union. India was dependent on the Soviet Union during socialism, the socialistic phase to a large extent, economically. But then, India had foreign exchange reserves which were only limited for a few weeks of imports, really in dire straits. And Dr. Manmohan Singh comes in with total bold reforms at that point of time: liberalisation, privatisation, devaluation of the rupee, new industrial policy, all right up front, and totally transforms the economy, brings in, unleashes the entrepreneurial skill, brings in foreign direct investment, and the economy takes off as a result of that, and we are still benefiting from it today.
Right, absolutely. That was a critical year in the journey of the Indian nation. A lot of economists, a lot of political observers have actually said that India attained political independence in 1947, but economic independence in 1991. So that was the import of the decision that Dr. Manmohan Singh took. But what also is important here is that the political will of the time stood behind him.
Right.
We cannot discount the fact that the then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao gave his finance minister Dr. Manmohan Singh free hand to execute whatever reform, whatever bold reform was required to actually bring India out of the dire straits, as you correctly mentioned. We were literally on the verge of a major global default. And to bring the country back from that cliffhanger situation was really credit not just to Dr. Manmohan Singh, but an equal credit to P.V. Narasimha Rao, who told Manmohan Singh that you are free to do what you want. And as you said, a lot of structural reforms were brought in, and for the first time, I think the economy was opened up for the foreign direct investment. The investment climate was eased, and a lot of private industry was encouraged to, boost investment. So suddenly there was a turnaround. A lot has been written about how, political and economic observers of the time have said that it took, Indian economy took a very quick reverse turn.
Right.
So the measures that Dr. Singh introduced really proved to be, a life-saving drug for the Indian economy, which was in the ICU at the time.
Indeed, and the public sector, also took a backseat after that, because I mean, India was a mixed economy, with very public sector driven, and here we saw the private sector coming to the fore, being encouraged, and we can see that that has led to the creation of so much wealth in the country, and also empowerment as a result of that. Many people would have to, look back and say it was, perhaps he was the right man at the right time in the right place. But, they would owe the strength that they have today to the times and the reforms that were brought in 1991, as you did mention, under the Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao.
Yeah, I think it was a major policy shift, not just in the journey of the Indian nation, but it was a major policy shift equally in the policies and philosophy of the Congress party, which had ruled India for much of the time until 1991. We all know that. Congress, was left of center, was largely a socialist party. And for Dr. Manmohan Singh and P.V. Narasimha Rao to bring in privatization at that time and to actually take a radical shift in the economic policy that the party had largely followed from the times of Pandit Nehru, then Indira Gandhi, and then Rajiv Gandhi for the time that he was around. So it was not a politically easy decision to take, but of course, as you said, that it was the right decision to take. What is ironical, though, is that, the private investors that were so emboldened and encouraged by the sudden opening up of the Indian economy because of Dr. Singh's several measures that were taken, they did take a hit in the second term of the UPA, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was actually accused of, leading a corrupt government that encouraged crony capitalism. So
Right.
that was quite a reversal, actually, but
Sure.
that was quite ironical.
So let's come back, take ourselves forward then to the time when Dr. Manmohan Singh became Prime Minister of India. Now he was, many would say that, he didn't have the political acumen to be in that job, but, anyone who rises to be Prime Minister of India obviously has political skills as well. One would say that, and he was leading a coalition government, though there was a political power center that sort of controlled it, which was outside the government. And there were, opposing forces within the coalition itself. So it was difficult for him to probably be as, as free with his decision making as he was in his early avatar as the finance minister. But despite that, I mean, there are some key points. Let's take the Indo-US nuclear deal here. Foreign policy came to the fore. India came out, he was anyway an advocate of globalization. And clearly, India was beginning to take its place also amongst in the international community as a rising economic power.
That's right. You see, his appointment as Prime Minister will continue to be debated because it was a very important political event in the history of the Congress party and the country. Why was he weak and why was he unable to perhaps, firmly speak to coalition partners? In my own political understanding and wisdom, it was a simple outcome of the fact that he was, after all, a nominated Prime Minister. He never won a Lok Sabha election. He was perhaps the only Prime Minister who was always a Rajya Sabha member. In fact, his greatest regret, if you look at the books that were written about him, was that he was unable to win the only Lok Sabha election that he fought in 1999 from South Delhi, when BJP's V.K. Malhotra defeated him. So you see, he was then Congress President Sonia Gandhi's appointee, the choice of Sonia Gandhi. And even at that time, if you look at the political events and the climate, Pranab Mukherjee, who was the senior most member of the Congress party at the time, on whom Sonia Gandhi relied a lot, was actually the hot favorite to succeed, Sonia Gandhi, should she step down, because the mandate was for Miss Gandhi at that time. But since she stepped back and suddenly chose Dr. Manmohan Singh to be the Prime Minister instead of Pranab Mukherjee, that was a huge issue at that time. In fact, we had learnt at the time that Dr. Mukherjee had refused to be part of the Manmohan Singh cabinet, and it was only after great insistence from Sonia Gandhi that he joined the cabinet, after Sonia Gandhi said that his experience was necessary. So that was the context of Dr. Singh's appointment as PM. It is from there that we will have to see the performance of the UPA. And yes, the coalition partners were tough. His first big test came at the time of the Indo-US nuclear deal, like you correctly pointed out, when the left partners clearly said that we are not going to support it. But you see, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was largely viewed as weak, exhibited tremendous courage and firmness at the time of the execution of Indo-US nuclear deal, because he risked his government. Left partners withdrew support, and he was ready to face a vote of no confidence, and he even won it in 2008.
Right.
And he famously proclaimed at the time that he was very happy that the deal had been actually executed, because it would end India's nuclear apartheid.
Sure.
So that was the importance of the decision he took. So he did have his moments of firmness. It was not as though he was not firm.
Right, and analysts, who've been looking at Dr. Manmohan Singh's life, even as a Prime Minister, have said that he gave a lot of independence to his ministers and also to the senior bureaucrats, because he himself, being in positions like that earlier, he trusted them. So in that context, you have to look at it from that point of view, that I mean, he was a leader who was not micromanaging at every stage. So, I mean, if one looks at the UPA and whatever happened to it in the second term, whether we should blame the Prime Minister or not is, given his style of functioning, is something that could be debated. What do you think?
Yeah, in hindsight, we can sit in judgment of people, but it is really for leaders who are in the moment to take important decisions that will determine the course of histories and nations. So I've always believed that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, during his first term, took off gloriously. The kind of measures that he introduced, brought him a lot of public acclaim, especially the NREGA, which was a landmark, act that was to guarantee, wages to poor workers. He brought in transparency in governance through the Right to Information Act. He legalized education by the Right to Education Act. He brought the Right to Food Act. So he did all the right things. Then he brought the farm loan waiver, which was the first kind of an institutional mechanism to actually ease the burden of Indian farmers. And naturally, he won a stunning second term because he had done all this. But then it was the second term that proved to be the undoing of the UPA for the various scams that continue to be debated and challenged in the courts of law, 2G, Commonwealth, coal allocation. So all that happened.
Sure.
And I do still vividly remember the last press conference that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh did while in the PMO. And when he was asked this question that you failed to rein in your corrupt ministers, he was very candid and he said that I did the best in the situation that I could. So perhaps he took a conscious call in the larger interest of the nation to stay put rather than perhaps resign, because a lot of people at that time believed that he should have taken a firm stand against corruption and perhaps resigned. But was that the way out? Was that the correct alternative? Would it have been proper to push India into political instability? So perhaps Dr. Singh chose national interest above personal interest.
So we could talk on, and especially we could also go into the international affairs and the national security aspects as well. But thank you very much for the moment, Aditi Tandon. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us.